Hello and welcome to PFF Wire. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. Shout out to all the sickos out there on Black Friday watching PFF Wire, trying to get all your fantasy news and notes for the weekend. Brad, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great. I ate too much food as I tend to do, including this morning, a little plate before the USA game. Also, probably too large of a plate, but hey, we're thriving.
Absolutely, same here. I had the annual Thanksgiving sandwich the day after, and then I'll have like another annual Thanksgiving sandwich tomorrow, and another one on Sunday. So yeah, I'll be nice and plump for the Sunday slate of games. But let's get into the latest news of the day. Let's actually start off with I think it was ESPN who was reporting that Matt Rhule nearing a deal with Nebraska. I don't think that this is a major surprise here, but Matt Rhule has been a great college head coach throughout his career. Not exactly the greatest NFL head coach with Carolina, but he really was making the rounds last week with all these media appearances on seemingly every show. So I guess it's not that surprising that now he's getting picked up by Nebraska, and then he can kind of start getting going on his college career once again. But I don't know. I know things have changed since Matt Rhule last coached in college, a lot more NIL, but I would expect him to turn around that Nebraska program.
I think there can be sometimes folks see a coach make the NFL leap and then think they're not going to be good when they go back to college. I think he's going to do a great job. I've mentioned this before. I have had the chance to hear him give a speech, and I think he plays so much better to a group of 18 to 20-year-old guys that just want the rah-rah, run through the brick wall, everyone be kind of galvanized around a united message. So I think he does a great job in that facet. And it sounded like in Carolina, he was too hands-on. He wanted to be too involved in everything.
Right.
In college, you can do that, right? Those head coaches have their hands in every single component of building up the program and all that. So I think it's a better fit there. Nebraska obviously will take whatever they can get at this point. A once proud program has been struggling of late. I think it's actually a good hire for both parties.
Yeah, struggling of late, basically struggling for the last like 30 years, essentially at this point. And like since they've had like serious national relevancy with like Tommy Frazier as quarterback. So yeah, we'll see if Matt Rhule can get them back into that type of contention. If I were him, I might have tried to get into the SEC, but Nebraska is certainly not bad. And that was Chris Lowe of ESPN who reported that Matt Rhule would be going or is nearing a deal with Nebraska. In our Fresh Off the Wire segment, not a lot of news that we're not going to get to later on in fantasy news and notes. As usual, we will go game by game, give all the fantasy news and notes for injuries and everything heading into the weekend. But I just want to get some of your takeaways from the games yesterday, because obviously we had three really solid games. Bills squeaked one out against the Lions. Cowboys had a little bit more of a decisive win over the Giants. And then depending on who you talk to, the Patriots either got screwed by the refs against the Vikings or kind of shot themselves in the foot quite a bit in the fourth quarter there. But just overall, what were your biggest takeaways from yesterday's games?
Yeah, we did get three great games, which was nice. I mean, all high scoring to a degree, good action. It's funny. I'll start with go reverse order. So I thought I saw Vikings fans complaining about the officiating for much of the game. I think it went both ways. I think even during the game at one point, one of the announcers was like, I forget who it was. They were like, do you think the announcers want their family at home to see them on TV? Like, they're calling so many penalties. They're trying to get this screen time. And I kind of chuckled because it was true to a degree. But my biggest takeaway was, look, I think Minnesota's Vikings defense is bad. I've said it a bunch, but still cannot take away from Mac Jones going 9 of 13 for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns on throws of 10-plus yards downfield. Before this game on the season, on throws 10-plus yards downfield, 27 of 58, 634 yards, so 10.9 yards per attempt versus 17 yards per attempt yesterday, and then 1 touchdown to 7 interceptions. So more touchdowns on downfield throws yesterday the entire season. He played well last night.
He did. He played really well. It was good to see him bouncing back because he struggled against everyone this season. We've seen a completely different Mac Jones basically this whole year. Obviously, it didn't help that he had the high ankle sprain early in the season. But even before that, even in the first couple of weeks of the season, he didn't look the same that he did last year. And that goes back to preseason and training camp, everything like that. So it was good to see him bounce back. I would say, though, that, I know that the Vikings got blown out by the Cowboys last week, but now in the last 3 weeks, they've beaten the Bills, now they beat a Patriots team that at least looked better on offense for the first 3 quarters of the game. You could say maybe that was the Vikings defense. Maybe that was the Patriots just kind of figuring things out a little bit to coming off the bye week or 2 weeks off the bye week. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the Vikings are Super Bowl contenders, but I think that the way that they were able to hold the Patriots there in the fourth quarter, when the Patriots had, I think it was 4 different drives that they could have either, taken the lead, tied the game, made a run at it. And the Vikings held up when it did matter in that game. And as I mentioned, yeah, the Patriots did shoot themselves in the foot. And the no touchdown on the Hunter Henry catch, I think that, as soon as that play happened, when Terry McAulay was saying, like, yeah, there's no way that's going to be ruled a catch, I was like, all right, well, I see where this is going. Like, I think, like, logically, that should probably be a catch. Like, I don't know why you have to go all the way to the ground with the football. Like, I'm not sure if there's like a specific reason why that was first initiated by the NFL or anything like that. But like, that's one of those where, like, if you just like showed that play to a 8-year-old kid and was like, is that a touchdown or is that not? He'd be like, that was a touchdown. And then like nothing logically says that shouldn't be a catch to me.
Common sense approach, although it is funny now that you mention it. Jesse James against the Patriots was kind of a similar at the goal line, like arguably also probably should have been a catch. But it's funny. Someone showed a side-by-side of Travis Kelce earlier this season where it wasn't even close. Like, he had way less possession than Hunter Henry did last night. Also, a great game for Hunter Henry. He did have 2 touchdowns without that touchdown.
No, he had one.
That would have been the second touchdown. Yeah, so it was a bad call. There's no question about it. But I don't think you can come away from that game as a Patriots fan, or you shouldn't, and be like, oh, that was the ref's fault. They're the reason we lost that game. I don't think that's the reason. And yeah, Minnesota, you got to give them credit. I think the difference, the one-score game thing where they played 1 million one-score games last year, they lost more than they won, and now this year they're winning all of them. But I do think it's not just luck. There's also, they're not conservative. They're still pushing the ball downfield. Right. I think Kevin O'Connell, I think Mike Zimmer's a great defensive coach, but Kevin O'Connell doesn't feel comfortable. He probably shouldn't, because his defense is really not good, allowing 24 points a game on the year. They're bottom 10 right now and just points allowed. But yeah, that was not the ref's fault in that game. I guess moving on to the other ones. Main takeaway from Dallas, really, I mean, there were so many Giants hurt. I don't know if you could take away a lot from that game, really. I think Odell Beckham Jr., who I'm sure he now probably will go there. I still think Michael Gallup played really well in that game, but I think they need one more option. Dak on third down just stares at CeeDee Lamb a lot of the time. Yeah. Not that you can blame him. He's awesome. And then the morning game, Detroit is frisky. They're plucky. They also are missing, their 2 starting guards and managed to move the ball really well on the ground. Jamal Williams now has as many touchdowns as the Denver Broncos. It's
wild. I mean, the Lions, they're frisky. Like they compete against these tough teams, but I also still think that there's this hole in their coaching where they're still losing too many of these close games. They're not able to complete the comebacks, and the time management in that game yesterday in the afternoon game was really just bizarre. I mean, I was watching that with people who barely even watch football. Obviously, we're all there with our families and everything like that. And, on that 4th down play where they had, I forgot what the situation was coming in, but they were just at the line for 10 seconds, letting time run off. And you're like, why are you doing that? Because, and then it was after the 1st down as well. It was almost like they had conceded that they were just going to kick a field goal. I was like, you guys still have 3 timeouts and 40 seconds on the clock, whatever it was at that point. Take a timeout. Do not just settle for a field goal here, because if you settle for a field goal, the Bills are probably going to come back on you.
They're in a dome against a team that has a kicker they drafted in Tyler Bass who can hit deep field goals, especially inside of a dome. And I think they were playing scared to the point of, we want to give Buffalo the ball with as little time as possible. No, go get a 4-point lead. So Buffalo needs to score a touchdown, not hit a field goal to win that game. It was, I will say, so he did. Dan Campbell kind of in ways lost in the game with time management. I know Romo was also freaking out about not letting the clock run down to the 2-minute warning, which I was sitting there saying the same thing earlier on the drive, and they added an extra 30 seconds. But to his credit, their first 2 touchdown drives, kind of just taking a shot now at the anti-analytics, take the points crowd. They were only in that game because they went for 4th down 3 times in the first half, converted twice, and scored touchdowns on 2 of those drives when they converted. So credit to him as well. But yeah, I mean, the end of the last 5 minutes was ugly.
Yeah, it really was. My daughter just came in here and handed me a blank piece of paper for some reason. So that's what's going on my end right now. My door's wide open. So I'm a little bit distracted here. This is what happens on Black Friday when the kids are home, the family's home, everything's like that. But before we get into our fantasy news and notes for every game coming up this weekend, let's take a quick break. PFF Wire is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Also, make sure to subscribe to the PFF Wire podcast on Apple and Spotify and use promo code PFF35 for 35% off a PFF Plus subscription. Great deal on that right now. Quick update, my door is now closed. So apparently my 5-year-old overheard me talking about her and decided to close the door. So let's get into it. First game of the week that we're going to get into. Buccaneers favored by 3 points in Cleveland against the Browns. For Tampa Bay, Russell Gage is out with a hamstring injury. Running back Leonard Fournette doubtful with a hip injury. And then I don't think I've seen an updated injury report for the Browns, but David Njoku was limited with ankle and knee injuries early in the week. My initial reaction on this is that, I don't know, I guess both of these teams have been relatively, like, the Buccaneers are getting hot right now. Browns are still a little bit up and down. I'd be leaning a little bit more towards the Buccaneers in this game just because they do seem to be trending in the right direction. And yeah, I guess it kind of hurts to have Russell Gage out of this game, but he's barely played or contributed this season anyway. And ultimately, might be a good thing for Leonard Fournette to not play in this game just because Rachaad White does look like a little bit more of the more explosive back. And then they've also got, Keyshawn Vaughn, who's like barely played in his NFL career. But I feel like every time he touches the ball, he gets like 6 yards. So I actually want to see what Keyshawn Vaughn could do with kind of a more expanded role.
Hey, Vanderbilt Commodore legend right there. So yeah. I couldn't disagree with you. But yeah, this is one of my favorite bets of the week. There is one important note here. It's supposed to be 20-mile-an-hour plus winds in Cleveland, and it's going to rain. So it's certainly a conditions impacted game. I think Tampa, they went from -3 to -3.5, and I think the weather is why it's back to 3 now because, of course, the Browns can run the football well. But I love Rachaad White. I would say this. Put him in your DFS lineup because this is probably the last week before he becomes an expensive player.
Right.
I think he is this year's Rashad Penny, where he could like win a bunch of people their fantasy football leagues with great in the last 6 weeks of the year. Because I think even healthy, they're going to try to phase out Leonard Fournette a little bit and get more and more of Rachaad White. And then I also like Chris Godwin in this game. Martin Emerson, the rookie's been good, but I think you got to avoid the outside with Newsome and Ward a little bit, and Godwin could eat in the slot. So yeah, I like Tampa, I like Rachaad White, I like Chris Godwin, all in this game.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, we've got the Bengals favored by 2.5 points in Tennessee against Titans. Point total 43.5. For the Bengals, Jamar Chase questionable with a hip injury. Joe Burrow said either Wednesday or Thursday that he expects Jamar Chase to play in this game. I don't think they were like quite as adamant about that today, but we'll certainly see if he's able to play. But running back Joe Mixon out with a concussion. On the Titans side, they had Ben Jones still in concussion protocol, but they were hoping that he was going to be back at some point today. And then also defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons has been limited with an ankle injury. But yeah, Bengals only favored by 2.5 points in this game. The Titans are getting tough, and the Bengals already can't really run the ball this year. Titans are tough against the run. Now they've got Samaje Perine likely starting this game. They've got Chris Evans as well. I think that kind of limits what the Bengals can do overall offensively, but getting Jamar Chase back would be huge.
So the Titans are tied with the Lions, although maybe the Lions have broken this tie. They have. But before yesterday, the Titans also had allowed 22 receptions of 20-plus yards downfield. So if you could hold up on the offensive line, you could beat them downfield. However, the Bengals are still our 28th graded pass block unit on the year. They've struggled, not as much as last year, but this is a game last year where Joe Burrow took 9 sacks in the playoffs. 3 of those from Jeffrey Simmons, who had, I want to say, like 8 or 9 pressures and 3 sacks in that game. So his status is a big deal. And Ben Jones, too. Underrated, really, really good center. There's a video earlier this year, him and Mike Vrabel hugging in the hallway because Ben Jones is playing through a bunch of injuries. But DJ Reader's back for Cincinnati now, one of the best nose tackles in the NFL. So if Ben Jones cannot play, the Titans offensive line, they need everybody they can get out there. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I like teasing Tennessee up with maybe Pittsburgh or another game that you like in a teaser, up to 8.5 points. But the Bengals could, if they hold up long enough, maybe Simmons isn't as big of a factor, they could beat them downfield because you can beat this Tennessee team over the top.
Definitely. Next up, we've got the Texans and the Dolphins. Miami is favored by 14 points in Miami. Point total is 47. For the Texans, Derek Stingley still out with a hamstring injury. And then for the Dolphins, Teron Armstead has been a DNP with a toe injury, and Raheem Mostert doubtful with a knee injury. So definitely get Jeff Wilson in those daily fantasy lineups. I think that he'll obviously have a major role, and then we'll see who else they mix into that backfield, whether it's Salvon Ahmed or Myles Gaskin. They do have some options in there. But it's going to be the what's his name? The Kyle Allen show or for the Texans in this game. So I can certainly understand why it's a 14-point line. 14's pretty high, but Dolphins can definitely move the ball on offense. I don't feel super strongly about this game either way, but yeah, I mean, I certainly think the Dolphins are going to win. I just don't know if they're going to win by 2 touchdowns.
And these are not key numbers, but whenever you move 2.5 points, it's obviously notable for bets to come in and for Vegas to respond to that much to it. So I think the thing here too is Lovie Smith. There's been videos on this. This isn't my original thought. I learned from the Twitter sphere. He sits in his Tampa 2, but on third down, he plays the same coverage basically every single time. The Honest NFL, who's a great Twitter account. If you don't follow him, I don't know who he is in real life, but he's an anonymous former NFL guy who I think is maybe my favorite follow on Twitter. But he was showing all these videos and clips of how they're so predictable, and the way you attack them is down the seams. Mm-hmm. We talked a bunch about how Mike McDaniel is just so good attacking over the middle of the field. One player I like, though, you mentioned Jeff Wilson. The Texans' run defense is historically bad. But number 2, I think a sneaky play, Mike Gesicki. I think you don't need to block that much against this pass rush. I think this could be a game where they let him run down the seams. Maybe he scores a touchdown or 2 or get some, yards after the catch. He's a sneaky player I like in this game.
Is there any fear about Tua actually being able to throw down the seams and target guys in the middle of the field?
He's been doing it so far this year. Yeah. So I mean I think he's more open to throwing over the middle of the field than a lot of quarterbacks, like the Russell Wilsons and those guys in the world that just don't do it. I know he's shorter, but I think because it's quick game, maybe not like you said, maybe not more longer developing plays, but he's been attacking the middle of the field, generally.
Yeah, and I mean Mike Gesicki's still not playing. He's basically still playing, I think, like only half of offensive snaps, but he's very hit or miss in fantasy, where like sometimes he'll get you touchdowns, he can sometimes get you 2 touchdowns, or maybe he'll catch 1 pass for 12 yards. But yeah, I do like that matchup. Dameon Pierce has been a little bit disappointing for the Texans in recent weeks, so I'd like to see him get a little bit more involved in this game as well. All right, up next, are you still going to the Bears-Jets game?
I will be there, baby.
Brad will be in attendance for Bears-Jets. Jets are favored by 6 points. For the Bears, Justin Fields officially questionable with a left shoulder injury. For the Jets, Dwayne Brown has been limited with a shoulder injury. Sauce Gardner limited with a calf injury. And wide receiver Corey Davis, full participant with a knee injury, is going to be Mike White at quarterback for the Jets. And then for the Bears, it would be Trevor Siemian if Justin Fields can't play. I mean, I know you don't want to hear this. I still think the smart play for the Bears is to sit Justin Fields. Don't let him play on that injured, non-throwing shoulder. But at the same time, I want to see Justin Fields play. I know you want to see Justin Fields play. But, yeah, if it's Trevor Siemian, I actually like the Jets a lot by 6 points. But there's that fear that Justin Fields could play, obviously.
Offense has literally been Justin Fields. So if it is Simeon, I think it will be ugly. The Jets have a phenomenal pass rush, second in pressure percentage on the year. Another game where there's supposed to be rain, which adds to my excitement of I'm going to MetLife. I might be watching Mike White, Trevor Siemian, and I probably will be getting rained on during the game. So I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have the time of our lives. But interesting thing here is, and I do think part of it was Fields' injury notes coming out, but I have to mention the Jets were minus 4.5. They go to Mike White, and it's now -6. I think it also is because of Fields, but we already knew Fields was limited before the Wilson benching. So I honestly think Vegas also might think like that's how bad Wilson's playing. That Mike White maybe just keeps it a little bit safer and is maybe a point on the spread better, which is a scary thought for a former number 2 overall pick. But yeah, I'll say this too. Obviously, because of my personal situation, I consulted our Dr. Mario Palazzo at PFF all about Justin Fields. Look, he can play. Like, he is physically capable of playing. We've seen quarterbacks play through this injury. You talked about Baker Mayfield. I mentioned Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago. This happened a couple years ago. He could do it, but it's a pain tolerance and pain management thing. And then, it's hey, you're 3-8. You're playing against a ferocious defense. Do you want to subject your quarterback to this? So, I hopefully he plays, but we'll see.
Make sure to read a story I wrote about DJ Reed, the Jets cornerback, today on PFF.com. DJ Reed, since he was drafted in 2018, is the highest graded defender on PFF when lined up at right cornerback. I feel like that's probably not something that most people would know, that DJ Reed has literally been the best right cornerback in the NFL since he was drafted. And since our stats go back to 2006, he is fourth among all defenders when lined up at right cornerback. He played right cornerback in college. Then when he was drafted by the 49ers, they decided to make him a slot and a safety. Did not work out. He was waived after 2 seasons. Caught back on with the Seahawks, who really like to play their cornerbacks on sides. He moved back over to the right side. It was great, and he's been even better for the Jets this season. He's been phenomenal. Sauce Gardner might be the best cornerback in the NFL already as a rookie. And then Michael Carter has also been really good in the slot. That's obviously Michael Carter, the cornerback, not the running back. Next up, we've got Falcons, Commanders. Commanders favored by 4 points. Point total in this one is 41. I feel like there's a lot of low point totals this week. For the Falcons, running back Caleb Huntley is questionable with an ankle injury. Commanders, tight end Logan Thomas, questionable with a rib injury. And pass rusher Chase Young, questionable with a knee injury. Does seem like he should be able to play in this game. And if he is, actually, I do like the Commanders in this game, favored by 4 points. I know that we kind of have acknowledged that Taylor Heineke is, playing football with a horseshoe up his ass right now, but it's working for him, and it seems to be working for the team, and they're on a hot streak right now.
No doubt about it. And they opened at -3 and have now moved all the way to 4.5, back to 4. But that's notable movement, right? You're coming off the field goal and staying at 4. It's just a terrible matchup for Atlanta. I mean, Washington can run the football. Atlanta is bottom 10 in EPA per rush allowed. I get for fantasy or whatever. I think both Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson are probably worthwhile people to look into. Atlanta loses Kyle Pitts. And I know we all, joke and everything, how little production he's had. He had one of the highest target shares in the NFL. Like, they weren't doing anything with it because it was inaccurate passes or, but he was getting peppered with targets. So they really lose a key part of their offense that obviously, hopefully can get back healthy from the MCL and actually get passes from Desmond Ridder or somebody else that can actually hit him in the hands. But, I think this is a nightmarish matchup for Atlanta. They have a solid interior offensive line, but, I mean, this defensive interior right now for Washington is single-handedly winning them games. And then Montez Sweat will bully. If he goes up against Caleb McGarry, which I think is his side, he should bully him in pass protection. Jake Matthews is a good left tackle for Atlanta, but nevertheless, every time I break this game down, I just don't like the matchup. AJ Terrell should play, but they still don't have Casey Hayward on the outside. So one of Samuel or McLaurin or Dotson should be getting open with regularity and being productive. I like Washington by a good amount this one.
Chris Lindstrom, the Falcons, the left guard, is,
right guard.
I believe, our right guard, our highest graded guard in the NFL this season. So it will be a fun matchup to see him go up against Jonathan Allen, because Jonathan Allen had a very easy matchup last week. I think that was against Kenyon Green, and then this week is a much more difficult one. So that will be a matchup of the Titans there between them. Next up, this line cracked me up when I saw it. If you told anyone coming into the season that the Broncos would only be favored by 1 point in Carolina against the Panthers, and that the Panthers would be playing Sam Darnold, would be on their 3rd quarterback of the season. Sam Darnold starting, fired head coach, pretty much an abysmal team. And the Broncos are favored by 1 point, and the point total is 36. Is this the lowest point total of the season?
It opened as the low. It was 34.5 at open. That was the lowest. I think 36 ties a game from earlier this year. The funny thing is, I don't like the over.
No. Yeah, and for the Broncos, KJ Hamler out, Jerry Jeudy out at wide receiver. For the Panthers, Terrace Marshall has been limited with a shoulder injury, and then Philip Walker still dealing with that ankle injury as well. So it is going to be Sam Darnold at quarterback for the Panthers. And quite honestly, I think it's the right move at this point. I think I said this on Wednesday's show as well. Like, why the hell not? Just like, let's see what you have in Sam Darnold at this point. Like, Baker Mayfield has been, I'll eat this one. Like, Baker Mayfield has been so much worse than I expected him to be this season. And it really makes you wonder what the rest of his career is even going to look like at this point, because there's no way the team can go into next season with him as, a starting option on the roster. So it's basically now about him building back up to potentially being a starter in the future. PJ Walker obviously dealing with a high ankle sprain that can't put him out there. So see if Sam Darnold can finally figure it out with Steve Wilkes as head coach and, a roster that is still kind of fighting and clawing for some wins out there. But good Lord. I don't know. I mean, I think the Broncos, I think they're going to win this one. I think they'll cover 1 point by winning, but I don't feel as confident as I probably should about it.
Yeah, no, I was wrong on Mayfield as well. I didn't think he'd be great, but I thought he could be like a solid upgrade and maybe help that team. He might, no reason not to play Darnold whatsoever. Honestly, the one fantasy team I like is the Denver defense. Probably Broncos defense, I think, is a solid potential play.
Just
both.
Start them both.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we've got the Ravens favored by 3.5 points in Jacksonville against the Jaguars. Point total 43.5. For the Ravens, wide receiver Demarcus Robinson, questionable with a hip injury. He was fantastic last week for the Ravens. Unfortunately, left tackle Ronnie Stanley out with an ankle injury. Running back Gus Edwards, questionable with hamstring and knee injuries, but he was a full go in practice today. And then Lamar Jackson dealing with a hip injury, but he is off the injury report and will play against the Jaguars. Jaguars, I don't believe, have a single injury, at least on the 53-man roster right now. As of Thursday, they didn't have any injuries to report. So certainly a good thing for them. I don't know. Ravens, I say this about every team, I feel like, but the Ravens are another kind of up and down, unpredictable team. But I do like them on the road against the Jaguars. I'd probably take the points in this one.
All right. Yeah, we're battling on this one. So I love the Jaguars. It was my bet on Sunday. It was +4, so it's actually moved towards them, I'm sure, because of Ronnie Stanley. This is my argument on the show is basically on offense, the Ravens are 7th in EPA per play right now, which is higher than I would have guessed. Jaguars are 9th. They're both top 10 in EPA per play on offense. And then on defense, the Jaguars are 14th. The Ravens are 12th. They are trending in different directions, where the Ravens defense started off very poorly and is now playing great football. Get Marcus Williams back. Kyle Hamilton's our highest graded safety now, the rookie. Whereas the Jaguars started off really strong and have kind of struggled of late. They have played teams like Kansas City. But with no Ronnie Stanley, you get Josh Allen, the edge rusher that is, in Jacksonville. And I think he could have a big game against whoever they put out there as the backup left tackle. And look, Baltimore, I think, will win, which I know is a small spread. But I just think coming off a bye, the underlying metrics are pretty similar. I don't know. If you think home field advantage is worth about 1.5 or 2 points, which is kind of what Vegas now views it as, you're saying on a neutral field that the Ravens are 5.5, 6 points better. I don't know if they're that much better.
Yeah, that's fair. Ravens have certainly been kind of hit or miss, but to get Marcus Williams back, I'm not sure if it's going to be in this game or not, but that certainly helps. And then, just to have Gus Edwards healthy, to get Mark Andrews back and they're healthy, all those things do matter. But obviously the wide receiver situation is still pretty ugly there in Baltimore. It doesn't help that Demarcus Robinson now dealing with that hip injury. All right, next one. A lot of news in this one. You've got the Chargers at the Cardinals. Chargers favored by 3 points. Point total is 48. Cliff Kingsbury, noted liar Cliff Kingsbury, said that Marquise Brown is expected to play. So we'll see what happens there. But it did sound like there was some confidence that Marquise Brown is actually going to play in this game. Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams has been DNP with an ankle injury, but wide receiver Keenan Allen, full go on the hamstring. Tight end Gerald Everett, full go on the groin injury. For the Cardinals, however, Greg Dortch is going to be a game-time decision. Is there a reason why Zach Ertz is not on injured reserve yet at this point?
I didn't realize that. It says season ending, so he should be.
Yeah, I don't know why he hasn't actually been placed on IR. Maybe they just haven't needed the roster spot. But tackle DJ Humphries has been a DNP with a back injury. Rondell Moore, DNP with a groin injury. And then Colt McCoy has been limited with a right elbow injury. But Kyler Murray has been a full go in practice on the hamstring. He is expected to play on Sunday against the Chargers. I know the Cardinals are dealing with some injuries here, but to get Marquise Brown back, to have DeAndre Hopkins, to have Kyler Murray, basically have like everyone healthy in their offense, other than we'll see what happens with DJ Humphries and Rondell Moore. And the Chargers offense, the Chargers defense has just been so terrible so far this season that I know you're not necessarily supposed to do this, but I kind of like the Cardinals and the over in this game. Usually you like to take the underdog and the under, but I could see this game going over 48 points, and I like the Cardinals at home.
Love the over in this game. I'm glad you said that. I could not agree more. I think both. Look, you're coming off. Both teams are coming off of a game against maybe their biggest rival in their division, or one of them. Arizona coming from a game in Mexico where they had to deal with off-field nonsense, and that was part of Hard Knock in season. Cliff Kingsbury briefly mentioned it and kind of tried to. I mean, I'm sure the HBO cameras tried to not make a huge deal out of it. Which, anyway, a lot going on, and I think the defense is just not good for either team, frankly. Yeah. I love the over in this game, even with some injuries on both sides, a little bit, small nicks and bruises here and there. I think we're going to get whoever wins the game. It's going to be like 37-28 or that type of game.
I also think that for both coaches in this game, who was it? Who reported that Sean Payton? I think it was ESPN.
It's these two.
It was these two that he would be interested in coaching the Chargers or the Cardinals. So he'll certainly have a close eye on this game. I don't think it's a Fox game since the Chargers are on the road. The Cardinals are at home. But yeah, Sean Payton might have a close eye on this matchup. And if I were him, I know that, I would probably rather coach the Chargers than the Cardinals, given, the GM situation, ownership, like everything going on. Maybe not ownership, but yeah, just like, I'd rather have Justin Herbert than Kyler Murray. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, especially with Kyler Murray's contract.
Yeah, but like you did say, though, we're finally going to get to see Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins at the same time. It would be cool if Moore could also play and if Dortch, can get back out there to have something underneath. But yeah, either I agree, of course. I take Herbert and his rookie deal over Kyler 10 times out of 10. But I mean, Sean Payton could have some awesome things happening in Arizona on offense as well. Absolutely.
I think there might be less yelling on the sideline if Sean Payton goes to Arizona.
Yeah.
So I hear anything about the Cardinals. It's just that everyone's constantly screaming at each other on the sideline at all times. Everyone's just so angry on that team. All right, next up, you've got the Raiders at the Seahawks. Seahawks favored by 3.5 points. Point total is 47.5. Really not a lot of injuries in this one. I think the only skill player, Dwayne Eskridge, has been a DNP with a hand injury. His hands have been an issue throughout his NFL career, but now there's an injury to blame on the hands issue there. I like the Seahawks with 3.5 point favorites in this game. I know that the Seahawks, the last game they played was in Germany. They lost the Bucs. I feel like people kind of forgot that they're good. Maybe I don't completely understand this being that low of a line, I guess I would say.
I agree with you. And I think also, the Raiders have one of the worst coverage units in the NFL, if not the worst coverage unit in the NFL. And you have, Lockett and DK Metcalf, who both were kind of dealing with some ailments that I'm sure the bye week was very nice to them to let them kind of, heal up a little bit. They obviously played through both of those things, but I'm sure they used, the time to rest and rehab. So, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe lean towards the over here again because Seattle's defense has played much better. I'm not sure I'm still a full believer in their defense.
Yeah.
And Devontae Adams doesn't matter. I don't care how good Tariq Woolen is. Devontae Adams is going to get his regardless. So, but yeah, I agree. This is a short spread. It almost is kind of fishy how short it is. So, I don't want to lay into it because I'm kind of confused why it's only 3.5.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's a bad matchup for the Raiders. I mean, Max Crosby's playing by himself out there in terms of pass rush. The young tackles for Seattle have been pretty good. And then, yeah, their coverage unit is just awful. So,
Nate, I do think Nate Hobbs will be back in this game at least.
Okay, that's huge.
He's dealing with a broken hand, and he was designated to return off of injured reserve. And at least the last thing I heard was that once he was designated to return, that he was expected to be back shortly after that. So I would probably expect him to play. I'm not sure what the messaging out of Las Vegas has been on that. I would have to check into that because last I heard on that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And obviously some things can change, but he is their best defensive back. They've been playing him kind of all over the defense there. So I'm not sure what the best matchup for him in this game would be. Probably against Tyler Lockett. rather than DK Metcalf, just because he's slightly smaller, usually a slot guy. But I like the Seahawks in that one. Next up, this is a line and a point total that's kind of absurd. Rams, Chiefs. Chiefs are favored by 18 points, and the point total is 42. On the Rams side, Matthew Stafford will not play with a concussion and neck injury. Tight end Tyler Higbee, questionable. Wide receiver Allen Robinson, questionable. John Wolford has been limited with a neck injury. I don't know if he's actually on the final injury report, so we don't know if it's going to be John Wolford or Bryce Perkins at quarterback there for the Rams, and they're not saying. They want to hold that off until the last minute to find out who's going to start. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter a whole lot. For the Chiefs, guard Joe Thuney, questionable. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney out with a hamstring injury. I mean, I don't know if the Chiefs are going to cover 18 points in this game, but I feel like them alone. I don't know. I like the over, I think is what I would say in this game, is that like, even if they don't cover 18 points, I don't know. I mean, what doing quick math, like what would the score have to be for them to win by 18 and for the under to hit in this
110?
game?
Like that's
right.
That's the only margin you get, basically. Yeah, 27-7, like that type of game. Yeah. I agree with you. So this is the biggest spread of the year. Obviously, that's not a surprise. Opened at 14.5 and has just steadily moved out the entire week as more and more Rams injuries have come in. But here's the thing, too, is in blowouts, that typically leans towards the over. This is the case for both basketball and football because, defenses stop kind of caring and they play prevent and kind of just whatever. And I think Sean McVay, whether it's Perkins or Wolford, I'm surprised you say you don't think there's the gamesmanship of holding out Perkins or Wolford is going to help them beat the Chiefs. You don't think so?
Yeah, I don't know if Andy Reid's losing sleep over that one.
Yeah, I doubt it. But yeah, so all jokes aside, I don't know though. It's also Allen Robinson's questionable, and we've talked about before. He can't do much against man coverage. The Chiefs play a lot of man coverage on the outside. You're going to get Steve Spagnuolo is going to send some blitzes, and that'll complicate matters for the young quarterbacks. But I would agree with you. I mean, the Kansas City might go up 28-0 in the first quarter, and then the Rams score 2 garbage time touchdowns late, and you're pretty much there. So yeah, the spread I have no idea. It's too many points.
It's insane. I mean, if gun to my head, if I had to pick, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, the Chiefs will cover 18 points. But fortunately, that's not the situation I'm in right now. All right, next up, you've got the Saints and the 49ers. 49ers favored by 9.5 points. Point total is 43. Alvin Kamara has been out of practice with an illness, but I think that Dennis Allen said today that should not be an issue. Typical injuries there. Running back Mark Ingram limited with a knee injury. Cameron Jordan has been limited with an eye injury. Jarvis Landry limited with the ankle injury. Marshawn Lattimore limited with an abdomen injury. And then for the 49ers, Deebo Samuel has been limited with a hamstring injury. There's another one where 9.5 points is a lot, but the 49ers do seem to be trending in the right direction, and the Saints have just been a mess all year.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of points, though, doesn't it? Again, San Francisco is coming off a Monday night game in Mexico. They spent the entire week before that in Colorado Springs. So it just, I don't know. It's almost like the reason, not the only reason, of course, but, I bet Detroit yesterday for a lot of kind of non-football or non-mathematical reasons, just kind of simply, look, Buffalo had to go to Detroit after digging out of a snowstorm, go back home, go back to Detroit. Like there's a little taste of that here for me with San Fran. But I'm not saying I'm betting it per se, but the big thing is, the yards after the catch are so important, and yards after first contact are so important for the 49ers. It's how they obviously do a lot of what they do. The Saints are sound. They're sound on defense. They're going to tackle you. They're low near the bottom of the league in missed tackle rate, stuff like that. I think Pete Werner, though, their off-ball linebacker might still not play in this game, but I don't know. It seems like a lot of points.
Yeah, Werner is out. And then what was I going to say? Trevor Penning, Nick Underhill of New Orleans Football, or that he is expected to be activated from injured reserve this week. Probably won't play or probably won't start, but good to have him back there in the mix, given the fact that they drafted him in the first round. It just like Saints 49ers, the line is 9.5. Raiders Seahawks, the line is 3.5. That's just, I don't know. It's strange, right? I don't know.
It is. I will say this though, which is interesting. So Ben Baldwin, who people probably know, does various things on Twitter that often piss people off. But one thing he does do is very simple. It's not his opinion. It's just you're using Vegas spreads to basically handicap teams, right?
Yeah.
And the Niners now are the number one team in the NFC on that list. It goes like Chiefs, Bills, Niners. They've jumped the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think there's a lot of love for what they can do. Underlying metrics, but also I think both sides of the ball. But I agree with you. You look at those two things in a vacuum, and it's a little strange. There's a 6-point difference between those two spreads.
Definitely. Next up, you've got the Packers and the Eagles. This is the Sunday night game. Eagles favored by 6.5 points. Point total is 46.5. For the Packers, Romeo Doubs still out with the ankle injury or has not been practicing. Robert Tonyan has been practicing with an illness. Left tackle David Bakhtiari has been limited with a knee injury. Randall Cobb limited with an illness. Running back Aaron Jones limited with shin and glute injuries. Wide receiver Alan Lazard limited with a shoulder injury. And then for the Eagles, A.J. Brown good to go, though he wasn't practicing as of yesterday with an illness. And Devontae Smith still limited with that knee injury. I don't know. Packers are still getting a little bit more love from Vegas than I think they might deserve, but it's always a little scary with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. But at the same time, the Eagles have not looked as strong in recent weeks. So I can somewhat understand this being a 6.5 point line. I probably still lean towards the Eagles, though.
Yeah, it was a full touchdown, and now that it's below a touchdown, I do think I would lean Philadelphia as well. I thought, so Seth Galina, who if people don't know is our, the guy who helps Chris Collinsworth and Kirk Herbstreit prep for games, is one of the best football minds at all of PFF. Talked a lot about this game on our Wednesday show for PFF Forecast. It's just a bad matchup for both offenses. So he liked the under in this game. And then also Judah Fortgang, who is one of our betting analysts who's been on an absolute heater this year. He also knows football, but not quite the X's and O's and scheme level of Seth, but also like the under in this game for some things he looks at. Two sets of really quality outside cornerbacks for both teams, right? In Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and then you get Jair Alexander, and now it's been Rasul Douglas for the Packers. So, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then whoever Green Bay trots out, Christian Watson, and whoever the case may be. Right. And then the loss of Dallas Goedert for Philadelphia has really hurt this team. They haven't run the ball particularly well. Anyone can run against the Green Bay, but long answer short, I think if anything, I like that kind of more of a low-scoring game, and maybe that's also why it's come under a touchdown, because maybe they think it could be, a 24-20 type of game where Philadelphia pulls it out.
Definitely. Romeo Doubs is out. He'll miss his third consecutive game. And then a lot of the other guys that I mentioned are expected to be available. That would be Elton Jenkins, Robert Tonyan, Jair Alexander, Randall Cobb, a lot of players. Aaron Jones, Alan Lazard, Aaron Rodgers, Quay Walker, Mercedes Lewis. So good. They're getting some guys back there, but still dealing with some injuries to some key players. Monday night game, as usual, we'll get into this more on Monday, but it is real barn burner between the Steelers and the Colts. The Colts are favored by 2.5 points at home. Running back Jaylen Warren for the Steelers has not been practicing with a hamstring injury, and then Paris Campbell for the Colts has been limited with an illness. I think the Colts might be getting a little bit too much credit for Vegas. We'll get into that game, as I mentioned, more on Monday, but I think I'd probably actually lean more towards the Steelers in that matchup.
I just said that, yeah. So we like teasing the Steelers, with the Titans was the one we did on the show. So you get both those teams 8.5 points. Look, Indy's defense is really, really good, but their offensive line is still a nightmare, whichever tackles they're trotting out there. And TJ Watt has been TJ Watt since he's returned. He's been really, really good. Maybe the sacks haven't been there, but he's been generating consistent pressure, grading above 80 in all facets of play. So I think it's going to be an ugly one. I think we're going to see both quarterbacks might throw 2 interceptions this game. When some of those props come out, the interception props, whatever, I would look into those for both quarterbacks. But yeah, Pittsburgh, I think, they've turned the corner a little bit. We've seen some more consistency from George Pickens. Kenny Pickett, I honestly think when I watch Kenny Pickett, I think he looks pretty solid for a rookie, that is. But still, but yeah, both defenses here, I think, match up well with the offenses. The Steelers secondary is not good, but I'm not sure Matt Ryan's going to have enough time to get the ball out anyway. So yeah, maybe Michael Pittman over receptions, I think, would be a good bet if you wanted to bet on something positive. But otherwise, I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring football game.
Real quick before we get into best bets, there's a question here. We've got a bunch of questions, but we'll get into this one from Mojal. Giving up a first rounder for Payton worth it for the Cards and Chargers? So I would say in a vacuum for the Chargers, I think that Sean Payton would be worth a first-round pick. Just, given the current state of the roster, I think that they are ready to compete for a Super Bowl, and I don't think a first-round pick would be too much for that roster to give up to get Sean Payton. One question I would have, though, is that I do still like Brandon Staley as a head coach, and is upgrading from Staley to Payton worth a first-round pick? Like if you were upgrading from, the worst head coach in the NFL to Sean Payton, then yes, it's worth a first-round pick. I just wonder if that upgrade from Staley to Payton would actually be worth that in the long run. But in a vacuum, I think for the Chargers, it would make sense. And for the Cardinals, yeah, probably. You don't love giving up a first-round pick because I don't think that roster is as talented as the Chargers is. But I do think that you're a lot closer to winning a Super Bowl with Sean Payton as your head coach with Kyler Murray than you would be with Cliff Kingsbury.
This is a take of mine, not a take, but a thought that has changed recently. I think the answer is a definitive, 100% yes for both of them. Yeah. And I think I would not, if you asked me this question a couple of years ago, that probably would not have been my answer. I just think we're seeing across the NFL more and more how much coaching really, really, really matters, but also how there's this class of coach, 5 or 6 guys that are so far ahead of the rest. And it's if you can get a John Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, I think Sean Payton was in that conversation because there's even good coach. I know I keep bragging on him. But Mike McCarthy, he's a good NFL coach, but he's closer to the Cliff Kingsbury and Brandon Staley, whatever. Those guys that are up in their own stratosphere, the Pete Carroll, put him in the conversation as well. I think they're such difference makers to where, I really do think it's worth it. I totally buy it. I see exactly what you're saying with Brandon Staley, where it's you're not going from an awful coach to a great coach. You're going from a good coach to maybe a great coach. But I think the answer is yeah. I just think he can elevate a team so much and kind of push you over the edge. Yeah.
No, I think he definitely could. And, it certainly seems like he is probably going to be coaching again next year. He didn't really take on one of the top tier broadcasting jobs. He's a part-time guy on the Fox pregame broadcast. So it doesn't seem like he put all his eggs in that basket or anything like that. All right, real quick here, best bets. What's your best bet for the weekend?
So it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers -3. I'm glad it's back down to a field goal. I get why, because the weather, but I'm still taking it. I think Tom Brady will play through the wind and the rain. It scares me a little bit, but I just think they're a better football team. The Browns defense is just so bad, and I think the bye week was big for Tampa as well. A lot of positive energy coming into it, so I'll go with that one.
As I mentioned, I do like the Seahawks here by 3.5 at home, but I think my favorite bet as far as just lines and point totals go would probably be the over in that Rams-Chiefs game. I can't imagine the Rams scoring a ton of points in this game. I think the Chiefs cover, even though that line is 18. But I just think that, like you said, by the end of that game, the Chiefs might be leading so much that they're pulling starters on defense. Could be, Chad Henne or whoever their backup quarterback is at this point in the game. It could get ugly to the point where the Rams are able to get either a backdoor cover or at least put up enough points to cover to get the over on the point total. So, yeah, I think I would take the over at 42 on that Rams-Chiefs game. But we will be back with you guys again on Monday, right around this same time. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. As I mentioned earlier, PFF35 promo code to subscribe to PFF Plus. I would definitely recommend everyone do that. Download the PFF app on your iPhone. Make sure to subscribe to PFF Wire on Apple and Spotify. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news analysis. And as I mentioned, we will be back with you guys right here, same time, same place on Monday.